You're about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders, for coders, about all aspects of life as a developer.
I'm Will, the curmudgeonly experienced developer.
And I'm Beej, the optimistic newbie developer.
Complete Developer Podcast is supported by listeners like you. We are now on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Complete Developer Podcast.
A resume by any other name would be a curriculum vitae. This week, we're delving into our series on how to interview well. We'll actually start this particular episode a bit ahead of the interview itself by discussing how to craft your resume so that you can both get an interview and succeed while interviewing. But before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
My family is out of town. They go to the beach with my in-laws and some other families, and it's just too many people for me, so I don't go. I mean, it's like 25, 30 people in two houses that are stuck together. And
wow, that's a lot of people.
Way too. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's not 25. It's north of 20 and less than 30. It's somewhere in that range, depending on who all comes. And I need quiet space, so I don't go. Anyway, they're at the beach, and they have been since Friday. It's Monday now. And of course, this weekend, you and I went and played pool, which was pretty entertaining in a lot of aspects.
Well, I have to say, Aaron and I have been trying to get Will to come play pool with us for months now.
And then they realized just how terrible I am. Like,
you actually were better than us. So
no, well, for the first couple of beers, I was better.
Yeah, that's true.
After that, I don't think you were paying as much attention, or you would have realized that quality went south really fast. But anyway, family's been out of town, so like I've been reworking stuff, with my computers here, trying to get caught up on everything. I had a bunch of stuff I put off until after Music City Code. Mm-hmm. Now I'm trying to do that. I'm also following up with people. So like, if you're waiting for something from me, well, hopefully by the time this episode comes out, you'll have it. But they're like, my punch list just kind of got out of hand. My personal branding punch list was already oversized. So I'm catching up on all that. And then I'm binge watching Game of Thrones while I'm doing it, because I can actually go and watch the TV.
Nice.
Because there isn't somebody sitting in front of it. So that's what I've been doing. Like, I get a crick in my neck because I fell asleep on the couch at some point, which I never do.
You know what's funny? I did that last night. I was watching TV and my back was kind of bugging me. I'd gotten a massage and they'd kind of worked out just enough to make it sore.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm going to lay down because I'm watching the game, and I'm like, I kind of want to lay down. So I laid down and woke up 5 or 6 this morning.
Oh, I don't think I fell asleep for more than about 15 minutes, but something just really, I think, between C4 and C5,
yeah,
it's off, and I can tell, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it. So yeah, I'm basically just working a crap ton right now, because there's nobody in the house to remind me that I need to do something else.
Good point.
So here we are. So how about you?
Well, I've been fighting with microservices and transferring files. We're trying to take a PDF that's created in a report and then send that via email to the customer. I worked on it all morning and finally figured out that the issue was with .NET Web API controllers. It serializes everything to JSON. So even if you're trying to return a byte array, it'll serialize it and turn it to hex and clip it. And so we had to switch to an MVC controller to send a file content result. Once we did that.
Now, when it converted it to hex, did it also, I don't know if you looked, but did it also like base 64 encode it?
Yes.
Of course. Sorry. I hate those kind of problems because the thing is it's not that substantial of a problem, but it makes me mad because it like hits you and you fight with it, and then you look at it after like 30 minutes and you're like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like, and that's how you feel every time, and you will for the rest of your career when you deal with encoding issues.
Yeah. Well, what I finally figured out was I could talk to the report server directly by putting in my own credentials, running it locally. And what I got back from that, when I serialized that byte array, it gave me one thing that was different from what I was getting back from the service that was supposedly doing the exact same thing and just sending me the byte array instead of publishing it.
Oh, so you figured out it lies sometimes.
Yeah.
It's always wonderful. It's like, we don't have AI, but we have very fast liars.
Yeah.
Now.
Well,
it won't be long.
Well, since you mentioned binge watching TV, I'd just like to state that after years and years of being told by friends to watch it, I finally started on Lost.
Nice.
I'm also rewatching the first season of Dark Matter, which if you haven't seen that, it's pretty good. Yeah,
check that one out.
Yeah. And of course, I'm absolutely loving the new season of Doctor Who. Pearl Mackie is a perfect match for Capaldi's Doctor. It's just great. Honestly, I wish she'd been with him the whole run. Because I never liked him and Clara. I thought Clara was great with Matt Smith, but with Capaldi, it was just like a bad breakup the whole time she was there. It was like when you have the same set of friends and you break up, but you try to hang out in the same social circles.
Oh, that's awkward. That's like a Ben Stiller movie.
Yeah, it was really, yeah. So
cringeworthy.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Also, I think I pushed myself a little too far this evening on my workout.
No. You think? Well, I feel faint. No, you didn't really say that, but you weren't doing so hot when you came in. Actually, it was like after, you were a little bit like winded when you came in, but then when you sat down and like 5 minutes later, you're still you're like almost wheezing and just, you were hosed, man. I didn't think we were going to be able to record tonight.
I do have exercise-induced asthma, and I think I pushed myself to the point of inducing...
So you were like Piggy on Lord of the Flies.
Haven't thought about that in a long time. I will say this. Even though I was out of breath for quite a while, I did get 100 one-arm swings in with the 24 kilo.
Nice.
So that's pretty cool. But speaking of exercising and lifting, I have something kettlebell weightlifting related for IoTs. So let's go ahead and roll the music. This week for IoTs, I have a product called the Beast Sensor. Now, this is a sensor that is built for the weight room. It includes an accelerometer, gyroscope, compass, and acquisition frequency sensor. It connects with your smartphone via Bluetooth to track your lifting and give you motivation to keep improving. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. Who's talking to us this week?
Well, we got an email from Tom Stymus, hoping I'm getting that right. It says, "Hey guys, I've been listening to the podcast for about a month now and really enjoy the show. Happy to know and listen to a podcast that covers so many things that I struggle with, both technically and career-wise, is out there to help. I was hoping you guys would help me in constructing a learning path that I could follow." He goes on to give us a few personal details about his life, and we didn't, share everybody's details in public. If this was an offensively stupid request, then I appreciate the time you took to read it and hope the best for you guys. God bless.
I want to say thanks for the kind words, Tom. I would suggest taking a look at something like Free Code Camp. We have a few friends that have done that, or one of the other online learning programs just to get started.
So I guess typically what I would do as far as coming up with a career path, for most people, they don't have a direction. And so they're better off just starting moving. And I think, judging by what he said here, to some degree, that's kind of what he's going to have to do. He's pushing to try to get the general comp sci stuff down, so he can use it without the burdens of academia. And I this actually speaks to me a lot because I had to do that after college. Because even though I went through that stuff, like the way that they explain things in a college class doesn't allow you to apply it very well. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't make you viscerally understand it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I would say the biggest thing is to, it would be to try different things, like try different programming concepts. Like, if you're like, for instance, if you're looking at like algorithm efficiency, and you need to do the same, try to do the same operation at different levels of efficiency to get that visceral understanding of it. Because then you're not going to care, right? Like if it's big O of n versus big O of n squared, like which one's bigger. You don't necessarily have to quantify it the mathematical way.
Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting because you kind of taught me that way or guided my self-teaching that way. And I have a few coworkers that are self-taught and a few that have been through the typical computer science programs. And we get together and we have a dev chat every week. And sometimes these kind of things get brought up in that conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing too, is getting around other people that can explain these things in a down-to-earth manner, because like you do not want a computer science textbook for this. I have a book on algorithms. I don't think I let you borrow it because I did not want you to have it.
You told me that I could, because I asked you about
I told you it sucked.
You told me I could borrow it after I understood it.
Right, after you didn't need it anymore.
Yeah.
So that you could realize why it's very easy to come out of a computer science program somewhat crippled as far as your ability to actually do computer science. Mm-hmm. I don't know of a good way they just are not very good about putting things in a clear way. And I've noticed the same thing with a lot of disciplines, like neural nets, or gene expression programming, like some of the, the machine learning type stuff, like the real low level implementations of it. If you read a book on this, they make it completely impossible to understand it. Whereas if you have somebody that can't do all that math explain gene expression programming, they're gonna use metaphor and allegory and that kind of thing and get the point across how those pieces move. And so I think that's what you need to go for. Like look in Google for how would you explain this to a layperson. Ask that question that way.
Or go with some of the, at least to get started. What I did was I started off with some of the tutorials that were very basic, all right, we're going to build something and assume you know nothing about it, and then build from there. You remember the calculator? We joke about it all the time, but that's what I did there.
Yeah.
The blog, that's what I did with that. Very soon after doing that blog with MVC and in Hibernate and a lot of .NET stuff, I got my first job, and I'm using a lot of stuff from that. Actually, the first few months I was there, I had that bookmarked, and I would go back to that tutorial just to read through some things and remind me how to do certain things.
Yeah. And, but I would definitely push him towards getting the visceral understanding, because that's the win. Mm-hmm. Like that's what they're trying to give you in a computer science class. Yeah. Now, bear in mind, this is from a guy that got all the way through all the stuff, got out of college, like all the math stuff started clicking. You and I were talking about that the other day. The idea that numbers are not things, they're symbols of things. That didn't click for me until after college, like at a visceral level. Like, what the teacher told you, but being able to just go, oh, duh, like that never happened. Or, the idea that like actually being able to apply things like logarithms, and really just fundamentally understand that and use it and just go through my day. That didn't happen until after college. So I would push for that.
Yeah. And Tom, again, thanks. Send us another email with your contact information, because we have a Complete Developer water bottle just for you. Guys, if you'd like your very own Complete Developer water bottle, leave us a review in iTunes or comment on the website or any of our social media. We post all our episodes to Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. We're also on Path and Tumblr. Do you guys want to meet us and hear Will speak on why your DBA hates your ORM? Come down to Huntsville, Alabama for DevSpace Conference, North Alabama's premier polyglot technology conference. In addition to Will, you'll be able to hear talks on .NET, JavaScript, C++, and lots more. DevSpace is October 13th and 14th this year. Tickets are on sale now, and to get a 10% discount, use the code COMPLETEDEV or follow the link in the show notes. Again, that's DevSpace in Huntsville, Alabama on October 13th and 14th.
A solid resume not only gets your foot in the door, but it also sets the tone for an interview. And that second part is the part everybody forgets, by the way. In addition to helping the interviewer shape their questions about you, a well-crafted resume puts you in control of how the interviewer perceives your value, how they ask about that value, and can also change their perception of the way that you answer their questions.
So we've broken this down into about 5 different categories we're going to talk about. The difference between a resume and a CV, how the resume filtering process works, what should be in your CV or curriculum vitae, what should be in your resume, and then how to make it stand out. Getting started, we're going to talk about the difference between a resume and a curriculum vitae.
Yeah, and this is something I think a lot of people really struggle with. I know I did, because my early resumes, in fact, probably some that are still floating around in different places, are actually a CV. Mm-hmm. It's an exhaustive brain dump of just all the different stuff I've done, and it's not really good marketing material.
Well, I remember my understanding of the difference came, I guess it was our freshman year of college. Might have been right before it, but it was when my dad was looking for a new job. He'd been at the same church for about 14 years and had decided to start looking for a new position. He'd kind of been there kind of as long as he could, done a lot of good work, and was ready to move to another place. And he was working on his CV. And I came in, and I had been applying for jobs for the summer and stuff like that, and had a resume. I saw what he was working. I was like, wow, your resume is huge.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, this isn't a resume. Like, this is a curriculum vitae. This is everything. Because I asked him, I was like, why are you putting when you worked at a car dealership on there?
Yeah, because it's all the stuff. And judging by the resumes I've seen come across my desk at different points when I've been on the hiring side, I think a lot of developers don't necessarily grasp the difference as well as they should if they want to succeed.
A resume is hopefully a short document that lays out the value you can provide to a company based on the experience you have. And the hopefully part is people don't do this as much as they should.
Well, and I think honestly, like, the fundamental problem is that most people are really bad at marketing. Especially some marketers.
The thing is, this needs to be something that very quickly and briefly highlights what you have to offer that gets you from the pile of resumes to go through into the pile to interview.
Yeah. It's the guy outside with a sign, not the shelves in the store.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people really, really miss that, to their detriment. And to the detriment of everybody that has to read those huge freaking CVs. Please don't do this to anybody, even if you hate them. Like, if you hate them, kick them in the shin. Don't give them your CV.
So a CV is a large document that lists every bit of experience that might be useful to someone somewhere. This could even be courses you took in college.
Yeah.
Like, it is super detailed.
Charitable works, who you worked for, here's their contact info. I mean, I've seen so much stuff in some of those that, I mean, it's impressive. Like, I legitimately think this person knows how to type. I'm impressed. That's a start for a coder, but maybe not the one you want to give me if you're trying to go for a.
Well, let's just say I have seen some
stuff. I've seen things. You weren't there, man.
Well, let's just say I have seen some resumes that were more like curriculum vitas, but circling back around, you should have both.
Yes. Going into a little bit further, the way I look at the CV is that is like your database, and your resume is a select query for a particular person. In other words, it's a projection of a subset of the values in there that is tailored to the specific audience.
Wouldn't that be nice if there was a service that you could just put in all your information and then you put in a few keywords about the employer and it produces the resume for you based on your information?
Yeah, we should build that, or somebody else should. If you're doing that, like, totally let us know.
Yeah, we may bring you on the show. Talk about it.
Yeah. Talk about how ideas that seem easy maybe aren't.
Yeah. Will and I, neither one of us really give out our curriculum vitas unless specifically asked for it.
Yeah, or if you're working with a recruiter and it's like, hey, I can trust them to do the thing, and I don't want to do the thing, then I'm totally in favor of labor saving here. But I don't like to give it out because I know what kind of biases it creates in me when I see that from somebody else, and so I don't want to create that in other people.
Well, usually if you're going to be asked for your CV or give out your CV, it won't be the first thing you send to the company.
It's a while in.
Yeah, it's like your second or third round of interviews.
Yeah.
That they want to know, okay, well, what all have you done?
I will say, though, that if you look at my LinkedIn profile, which I think I'm connected to a crap ton of our listeners at this point, it does look a lot more like a CV. And the reason is because I don't know who that's going to.
Yeah.
I want it to be found. Well, I don't really want it to be found right now. Like, don't take that way. But should I decide at some point that I do want it to be found, I want it to be findable and there.
When you were looking for a job, you wanted that to be found.
Right.
But you don't have things that you don't want to do on there.
Right.
Like you have experience with VB6. You probably don't have much of that on there, do you?
Yeah, I haven't
looked at your LinkedIn in a while.
I can port VB6. Like I don't hate it, and I can troubleshoot it.
Yeah.
But I tell you what isn't going to be on there. The Advantage database, FoxPro, PHP. I don't really hate PHP, but it wasn't my thing. You know, it just wasn't my jam. Whereas like FoxPro, yes, I absolutely hate FoxPro. And the Advantage database, which is ancient, and I only know of one company actually using that. Like, I don't want to mess with that again. So those, if it's on there, it's like, oh yeah, this included this, and I survived it. Because, if you say it that way, it's like saying I survived a plane crash, AKA I don't want to hit the ground at 200 miles an hour again.
Yeah.
You got to couch these things.
So talking about filtering your CV to make your resume is used in the filtering process at jobs.
Right. And it's important to understand how this typically works. Okay. First of all, if you're in software development or if you're in IT, there's a lot of people trying to get into this. And a lot of them are frankly not qualified. Anybody that has done, if you don't believe me, find somebody that you know that gives interviews to junior developers, to alleged junior, air quotes, developers. I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. There's a lot of people that are wanting to get into the field that don't, they want to get a first job when they don't have the experience, enough to get by, or that just want the money and think that they can wing it. And as a result, what happens is you might get 200-300 resumes for something. And there's 2 people in there that are qualified.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like a database query. If you ever look at, and I'm really dating myself by saying this, but back in the day, what you typically had to do is you had to think about how the query got processed and say, okay, I want to cut this data set down as fast as I can and then work, the more expensive query operations, I work with a smaller set. This is what your HR manager is having to do.
Yeah, I understand. And, sometimes this can work for you. Sometimes this can work against you. Like when I applied for one position, they wanted 2 years of experience and I had almost 2 years of experience. So I said I had 1 to 2 years, which included 2 in it.
Yeah.
Which as a developer, I think that includes 2. So 2 is a part of this.
Right.
They wanted 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And so because I selected the wrong one, it never made it past that point.
Yeah, the other thing that'll happen too is they get these pools of resumes, and so they go, hey, we have a Java job and we have a JavaScript job. Guess what happens if you do JavaScript?
You get in the Java pool.
Oh, yeah. And let me tell you, the Java pool has been peed in. Mostly by JavaScript developers. But yeah, I mean, so you got to think about how they're essentially processing this query, because you want to screw around with the optimization so that you always go through. That's the way you build your resume. So the first thing that they do tends to be non-human. In other words, a machine filters it. This is why you got to kind of stuff keywords in there, but not too much, just enough to get through the machine. So, I mean, the big thing is they're aiming to disqualify as many people as quickly as possible. And they're okay with disqualifying a few people that shouldn't be versus spending a whole bunch of time filtering through.
Well, it's like the idea of the justice system is they would rather, the concept, I should say, is they would rather a guilty man go free than an innocent man get punished.
Yeah.
No, that's the intent of the justice system. It doesn't always work
whether
that
that's
way.
what happens now, we don't want to get into that. But yeah, I mean, that's what they're doing. So you got to think about it like that. Now, this can nail you, like we talked about before. If you have a tech that's on your resume and you don't want to do it anymore, this can get you because it'll get filtered and you show up on somebody's radar, especially like really big companies that have a lot of openings. That they're not targeting this filtering as well as you would think.
Depending on where you are and how large the company.
Yeah, I'm talking like Fortune 50.
Yeah, and I work for the state. I know from talking to people who came in just to get their foot in the door doing technologies they did not want to continue doing.
Yeah.
They came in, they worked for a year or two doing that, and then they moved to another department, or they moved up within their department to a position doing other things.
Yeah. I guess the thing is you want it to be your strategy and not a strategy imposed on you.
Yes,
you can help
exactly. And this is where filtering for the company you're applying to. If you know, hey, they've got 50 PHP positions open and 2 .NET positions,
then you don't mention PHP if you don't want to do it.
No, but if you really want to work there and you don't mind doing PHP for a year or two and then being promoted from within,
yeah,
like this is more of a strategy for earlier on when you're just trying to get that job.
Yeah.
Especially that first job.
Yeah, the first one is always really, really rough. And I think I was probably pretty lucky on that one.
Well, I would say the first one, because you wouldn't have experience doing PHP if it was your first job.
Well, you might because you did it in high school. Or
but you wouldn't have job experience doing it. So, like, I shouldn't say first job, maybe first few jobs. But, like, or if it is you move somewhere and you've got to get a job. My
second job was a situation where it was like, okay, yeah, I can go do this. I've done .NET. I've done like a year and some change on .NET, full time, and then I'd done stuff in college. But before that, I did VB, all the way back to, was it version 4, 16-bit? And I had done some Fox Pro, and I'd done some Access. And so I get this job that's supposedly a .NET job. And guess what I got to do? I got to do Access VBA and VB4. And that sucked. But so I guess the thing here is like you have to figure out what kind of jobs at that company you want to be filtered for and tailor your resume accordingly. Like be intentional.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's one of those things where you've been struggling to get a .NET job, because there's not that many where you're living, like you're not in Nashville,
like you're in Atlanta,
and
apparently,
So you may have to take a job, doing something that you don't exactly want to do at a company that hires a few developers doing the thing you want to do, and then work your way up from within. Yeah, that is a strategy to use.
Well, and I think I've often wondered if we were to ever take this podcast and make it not about software development, it would be a podcast about intentionality.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, because that's like an overriding principle. It's like it's okay to do what you do, but do it like and do it on purpose, and that's kind of what we're getting at here.
A lot of the stuff that we talk about is about doing things with a purpose. That seems to be just an overriding theme. Like we talked about goals before as the theme of this year.
It is very strange that we've done that, and I guess that's
just where we are.
It's just fallen out. Yeah,
it's who we are.
Now the other thing is once you get past that first level screening, now you get into the second level, and that tends to be a little bit more human intervention. So you'll have people that have a pile of candidate resumes that pass the first test, and they flip through it, and they might be looking for something like, okay, anybody that doesn't have a CS degree can't do this job. There's a pretty wide industry perception that a CS degree is necessary. I think that is complete and utter garbage, plus a few choice adjectives insulting people's family line, family history, and destination after their demise. I think that is unbelievably dumb, but we have that.
Mind you guys, this is coming from the guy with the CS degree. The guy without the CS degree in the industry agrees 100% that, unless you're doing something like the stuff that our friend Andre does,
Yeah, but I couldn't do that either. CS degree or not.
I can barely understand it when he talks about it.
Yeah.
So.
But there's that perception. And so you'll have companies that flip through that, or they'll flip through and they go, hey, has this person worked in this industry? Because there's a lot of industries that go, okay, I'm really special. Like, has this person ever worked in healthcare? Well,
you see now that's a funny thing because I was going to use my medical background as leverage to be like, hey, I already know the terms. I already know this stuff. I don't have to learn that side of it. It's not, I don't have to learn your industry because I already know it. And then I end up working for the government because, well, I had this interview that was really awesome and got hired onto a team that rocks. But
I mean, the thing is you're used to Byzantine and complex systems.
Yeah.
So really, they hired based on expertise. It just wasn't the expertise you thought you were providing. But they will look through stuff like that, or they'll go, hey, is this person, do they seem like they might understand computer graphics? I got, my job that I have right now, the fact that I've done low-level Windows graphics programming helped a ton, which is hilarious to me because do you remember when we were roommates, the graphics programming class that I took that I got an incomplete on?
I remember this.
And never finished it. Mm-hmm. Basically just dropped it. I mean, now I can obviously do it, but the class and the reality were not the same thing. But you're still going to get filtered on that. That's part of the reason I think this is idiotic, is because, I know exactly why it's idiotic, and I can express it in a 3D matrix.
Yeah. So delving kind of into what should be in your CV. This should contain all of your work information and experience. Yeah. It is the big honking document that's got it all. It's the database that contains everything.
Yeah, and I'll also tell you this, having that and being able to keep that up to date is extremely valuable, especially if you do like I did and you've contracted a bunch of places, because inevitably about 8, 10, 12 years, somewhere in that time range in your career, you will come across, you'll hit a little recession and you'll have to apply somewhere that's list all your employers and their addresses and then their phone numbers and their dog's name since you got out of college. And if you want to try to get that job, you probably need that in one place ahead of time, because it is horrendous to get it after that. Now, people go, well, I wouldn't want that job. Well, here's the thing. If they're asking for that, most people aren't going to fill that in. That's an easier job to get if you have the data.
That's true. Most people, it's a filtering process. Plus, you just said it's a recession.
Yeah.
There aren't many jobs out there. So you may not want that job, but it's a matter of you take the job that you can get to get through the recession until you can get the job you want.
Well, the other thing too is you may actually like that job. That's because just because their HR department is incompetent doesn't. In fact, that can make the computing department way better. Well, because all the people that are smart enough to get past that HR department work there.
Well, like I said before, I purposefully planned on going into healthcare. Did not plan on working for the government at all.
Well, and I pushed you towards the healthcare thing.
Yeah, you did
for the same reason.
For the same reason, yeah. And you know what? I ended up. I was looking for a job as a developer.
Yeah,
and
I really almost got a healthcare job too. Yeah. I mean, right down the street from me.
Yeah, that's true. I really liked what I learned in the interview and things like that. And I was like, I wouldn't mind working here. at least for a contract, and then get a contract until I can get a healthcare job. And then I got in there and started working and just...
Yeah. And
you've heard me talk about just how much I really like what I do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's stressful times. There were stressful times today.
Yeah. Yeah, those messages were interesting. And the thing with the CV is you can put stuff in there. In fact, you should, even if it's stuff that you don't want to do. Because, for instance, okay, I don't ever want, as a day job, I don't want to deal with VB6. That's not my jam. However, if somebody's converting something from VB6 to .NET, now I'm like, okay, I can deal with it to move it, and I have that background experience, and it may be a company that I really, really want to get into, and so I want to have all this stuff here. Keep all the things where you can get to them, even if you don't think you're going to need them. There's a lot of stuff that early on I did not like, and I would have thrown that out, and now it's okay, this is fine. Like, for instance, my Visual Basic experience has helped me a ton, learning Delphi, because guess where Microsoft nicked those technologies from?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in Delphi that's like, oh, that's like the do events keyword in VB. It's because, they call it something else, but they stole it from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, you talk about VB, but I've got a lot of WordPress experience.
Yeah.
And I get, oh my goodness, because it's on my LinkedIn, I get so many people sending me emails about WordPress
I took it off.
jobs.
I think I took it off of mine because I was just like, this isn't, this is creating a problem for me. Like, I keep a copy of the CV elsewhere. So I guess my LinkedIn is not a perfect copy. It's still a projection of the real thing because of that, because there's certain ones that you'll just get nailed on. But I keep as much of the stuff in one place as I can.
And this is also where you'll put non-tech jobs and things you've done too. Like, my CV has all the jobs, like has counseling at Vanderbilt, it has working in the emergency room, it has managing mental retardation facility.
Yeah. And, I've even pointed out that, like my father has got a nursery, an oil distributorship. Because of that, I'm partner in an agricultural commodities trading concern.
Yeah.
Because I have that background. I know enough of what goes on in all this stuff that I can make sense of it. And that, that helped me get that gig. And that's why, when I went for the initial job that I worked with this guy on, that, the agricultural experience came out. That's not something that a lot of programmers have because I grew up in suburbia.
That's very true.
And I had it, so I threw it on there because it was of use. And then, 4 years later, more than 4 years later,
my agricultural experience is having a garden in the backyard every year.
Yeah.
Which is nowhere near the level, because I looked into it when we were talking about, building some IoT things.
Yeah. It's a whole nother can of worms.
It is. It's and my dad now, he's retired from preaching, but he kind of for fun and just to make a little extra cash works on his best friend's farm.
Yeah.
And, he's a big kid. He gets to drive around big tractors and combines and stuff.
Yeah.
But he tells me about it, and I'm like, dude, that is a whole nother world.
You have no idea what is going to be useful. So keep all this is your junk drawer of experience. And then you pull the things out when you need them.
Well, it's like I was having a conversation with my executive director because I'm the only developer that has not been asked to be part of interviews. The main reason is all the interviews we've had, I've actually known somebody that was interviewing.
Yeah.
But it was also brought up, well, you don't have interviewing experience. I'm like, yes, I do. I was a manager that hired and interviewed people, and it's not on my resume because it wasn't in IT, and it was like 15 years ago.
Well, and you also didn't want to get pegged as an IT manager before you had the experience to back it up.
That's true. That's very true.
That's dangerous, and that we'll talk about that some other time.
Yeah. But that is on my CV.
Yes,
it needs to be because when I go for a management job, I can say, look, I've got all of this, plus I've got management experience, plus the other things on my CV include like the trainings that I've been through.
And you just never know because you might be writing software for people going through that.
Yeah.
And if you go, hey, I've got experience in mental health institution management. Well, hey, our company's writing software for mental health institutions for the very people that did the job that you used to do. Well, crap, we'll hire you instead of this guy that's got farming experience. Right?
That makes sense.
It's a differentiator. You might as well have it. Mm-hmm. If you got it. The other thing I like keeping track of like the previous employers and all that stuff. Keep all those bits together. Try to periodically troll through LinkedIn and or kind of pay attention if somebody changes positions. Like try to get that information moved so that you don't have to find it when the time comes. I do try to do that. I'm not doing a very good job of it right now because I'm pretty comfortable where I am.
I like to put things, just keep track of them. I mean, my CV is private, but on LinkedIn, just so that I don't forget to do it.
Yeah, or keep links to their profile so that you can quickly get it.
Like LinkedIn will let you put courses and trainings that you've taken.
Yep.
And so I keep track of those on there. Well, at least the current ones. I kind of redid my LinkedIn when I went to med school. So the other thing you can put in there too is classes you took in college. Especially if it was sort of a unique thing or something different, or just to say, hey, I've got experience in this, even though I haven't had a job that used it, I've got training in it. But basically, your CV needs to contain everything. It is the big document that you base your other stuff from. You're going to build your resume off of that to be specific to the company. So what should be in your resume? The obvious thing is to list your previous work experience. You want to make sure to carefully place the appropriate keywords in here when you're doing this, because as we've talked about, they are going to do keyword searches, both electronic and, in person.
Yeah. And, honestly, if you're looking at what kind of company you're working for, that you want to work for, think about what keywords they want. You may need to express that in a different way. If they're kind of a stodgy corporate firm, you may say, okay, I have JavaScript experience. If they're like this new hip startup and you may be applying to both at the same time. If it's a hip startup, you may say, I'm comfortable building single page applications in React. There's more than one way to say this, and you have to kind of target your audience a little bit. This is very much a marketing exercise.
And when listing your previous experience, try to focus more on what you have achieved rather than the tooling that you used to achieve it.
Yeah. Nobody would hire a plumber that says, I'm really good with plastic pipes. Right? Yeah. It's like, no, I need the dirty water to like not be here. Mm-hmm. And, not, leak through the floor or whatever. Like it's like, okay, we plumbed this huge hotel. That's better than saying, yeah, I've got like 4 years experience with PVC and flex pipe and a little bit of I got like a year of experience with copper. Nobody's going to hire you. Don't do that.
Yeah. List off what you've done and use that to talk about the technologies that you know.
Right.
I can say I have built full stack applications all the way from writing the SQL in the database to the .NET web APIs to the Angular single page application front end.
Yeah. And all the CSS and crap that goes with it too, at some level, because at least I can say that.
Well, I've written a lot of CSS for other things. We actually have standards that we use that I don't have to write that. But,
man, that must be glorious.
It is wonderful to have a designer. It really is. I have to say, it is awesome to have that. Like, well, one of the things is it's the state, so we have standards. Everything has to look the same.
Yeah. See, every place that I've worked has been twice that good because we've had double standards.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I like that. You can still mention the tools, right? And you have to get the keywords in there, but just don't let it overwhelm the value of the experience because these people are looking for value.
Well, one thing, and I don't see this in here, so I'm going to mention it now. The one thing that a recruiter told me once is have your resume tell a story.
Yes.
At this company, I did these things with these tools and get all that information out, but do it in such a way that it tells a story and the HR manager can look at it and get an impression of what you've done and almost get an impression of you.
Yeah. And I think at some point we really need to, talk through like Joseph Campbell's Hero of 1,000 Faces and like how to tell a story and like why this is so important for you. Because this podcast has been telling your story and telling mine to a lesser extent. Like my journey is being your teacher because like that was hard for me, but being my student's got to be way worse.
Well, it's told your story. I don't want to say through flashback, but
it is kind of through flashback.
It's like that. It's more through.
You weren't there, man.
It's told your story more through guidance.
Yeah. And the value of telling a story on a resume. And I saw some stuff that was talking about that, and I couldn't figure out a way to put that in here.
Not to bring up the evilness that is the prequels, but you are Qui-Gon Jinn to my Obi-Wan.
That's good. I thought you were going to say I was, Darth Plagueis the Wise or something. It's like, yeah, you're kind of irrelevant, but you're there in the stories somewhere. Thanks, man. The other thing too, and the story does this, but looking for other differentiators that can make you stand out a little bit. You can mention hobbies and stuff. I wouldn't do it too much, but especially if it ties into work somehow. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm really into weightlifting and I wrote an app for this and here's the GitHub. Like if you can do that, that humanizes you. It puts a hook.
Or, if you're applying to be a developer for a mechanical place or a place that, a shop that sells parts online or something, you can talk about enjoying riding your motorcycle and stuff.
Right. And it's more of, get a thing in there that humanizes you. The worst thing in the world is to interview somebody and you look at them and you go, this person doesn't do anything else. Like I can't visualize what the income that they're getting is going to support other than the fact that they eat and they sleep and somewhere, it's weird, but like if you give people some level of participation or some window into things, they're way more accepting. And because most resumes are kind of sterile, that's a better way to differentiate yourself. The job I have right now, I had the interview with Ben where he just absolutely raked me over the coals because I was his friend and he knew that I could handle it. And then the interview with our manager, and then I had an interview with the owner of the company, and that interview was almost no computer science. Like it went straight into biochem, cell biology and biochem. Just immediately because he knew I had some of that background.
Well, what's funny is I only interviewed with one person.
Yeah.
Then what was funny was the interview I had with the senior developers for the junior position. Like it was me, our director, because our manager had left, so we didn't have a manager, but our director and then 3 senior developers. And I'd worked with all of them on different things. And we pretty much just, they had a list of questions, and about halfway through it, they're like, yeah, we've kind of already answered all these just chatting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. There are other people involved in the decision when you get a job. Mm-hmm. Typically, stories go around, right? That's why you want to hook them with a story. Your experience doesn't. Like that has no virality to it. Whereas going, hey, this guy likes to ride motorcycles and da-da-da-da, and we joked about this. Like that goes around the office before you get there. Also makes it easier when you go in because people know what to have small talk with you about.
Yeah, I mean, I was the podcast guy.
Yeah.
You shouldn't include things in your resume that can be used to discriminate against you.
However, you can include things if you think they're going to be used to discriminate for you. And people are, there's somebody out there riding a car that their knuckles just turned white and there was a sharp intake of breath. You're trying to get hired for a job. If you know that there's certain things that are going to bias the interviewer towards you, that's called marketing. Now there's some things that's like you should probably feel a little skeezy about in some cases, but for the most part, you understand that people are going to go for whatever that is.
Well, yeah. Like if I were applying a big company here in Nashville is Lifeway, which is a Christian bookstore and multimedia and all sorts of stuff. If I were applying to them,
yeah,
I would go in there and I would talk about teaching Sunday school, about my dad being a preacher.
Right.
And I would emphasize my Christian background.
Right, because it's an asset. Now, can they discriminate against you or for you for that? No. However, all other things being equal, that positivity, that will be you will make a positive impression with that isn't them going, hey, because of this, I'm more sympathetic to this person. It's just I'm more sympathetic to this person. They don't forget, they don't remember the previous thing that anchored that.
No.
I'm not telling you to be, skeezy and try to get people to discriminate in your favor or anything like that. It's more of a thing of, okay, how do I shape the perception of me in such a way that I'm more likely to get the job? And so if you know that thing will help you, you can put references in there that are sort of oblique that they'll see. Now, you might also go, hey, I don't really want to be a place that would hire me for this. I don't want to work there. And you may want to leave that out. But just be aware of how that plays and understand that what the law says is the way things are and what happens. Those two things, if you take those two sets, they don't overlap perfectly.
That's very true.
And you need to eat.
Yeah, and this kind of leads into the final point, which is how to stand out. And we've already talked about focusing on the value you provide rather than the tools needed to provide that value. Tell a story.
Yeah.
Talk about what you did. Talk about how you can help the company, help the industry by what you can do using those tools.
Right.
And that'll get the list of tools in there but it talks about the value you bring.
And the other thing too is when you do that, you're not selling. You're selling things, but you're not selling as far as like it being recognizable by other people. You're just having a conversation. That's like marketing 101 is, when you come across as the hard sell, you come across as desperate.
One thing I saw a lot of in interviews was almost them trying to get you to do this, because they would ask, okay, well, there's your typical, okay, what's a difficult situation? How did you handle it? But what's something you built with that?
Well, and the other thing too is, people, when they're in an interview, they don't want to sit there and go, well, if I go to lunch with this guy every day, what are we going to talk about? Is he going to sit there and eat his food and be completely silent because he literally has no social skills whatsoever? Most people are not going to go for that. Another thing, get your formatting right. Make your resume look decent. Don't cram so much stuff on the page. Fix your spelling. Try to have a little splash of color. People print out black and white resumes. It's like, look, I'm too cheap to have a color printer here. And there's various reasons for that. Part of that is my wife's a teacher and she'll print everything out in color. And then I'm spending an ungodly amount of money on printer cartridges. Whereas what I've got now, $70 like 4 years ago, still going. Like that's a no brainer. But if I have to print a resume to get to somebody, I'm going to Kinko's and I'm going to print it out in color.
I don't think Kinko's exists anymore. Just FYI.
If I have to print a resume out in color, I'm going to go to, Office Depot or go to the UPS store or go to somewhere that has the capability to actually make it look nice because it's a marketing piece.
Yeah, that makes sense. Don't forget to take a few copies with you into the interview. This is really important because I have been in interviews where they had one copy of my resume that they were sharing between 5 people.
Yeah.
And when I came in and saw that, I just handed them 4 more copies.
Yeah, and you come across as looking prepared. You also make the interview go more smoothly. Like people can get a perception of you that has nothing to do with you.
No.
And I wish more adults actually understood this. Like you can go into a situation, right, where you're doing everything right, but because the situation is awkward, people's perception of you is awkward.
And kind of the overall theme of the resume here has been make sure it is tailored to the company where you want to work. We've been talking about that pretty much the whole time, about tailoring it towards that company. Now, this episode is not intended to be a how-to guide for building a resume. There's plenty of those out there. There are even services that will build or edit your resume for you.
Yeah, I actually have looked into, professional, resume building people.
Yeah.
Because past a certain level, it's like, do I really want to spend the time to really do the research and do this, or do I want to pay somebody that is probably a lower hourly rate? And it may be worth it at some level. I'm not sure if it's worth it at mine yet or not, but I've looked at it.
We may be creating some how-to material separate from the podcast at some point for building a resume. Yeah,
because if we have to spend the time to create those materials, you're paying for them, buddy. No, not really. Well, yeah, really.
This has been more of advice and guidelines to use when building your resume.
Yeah, and it's the stuff that doesn't get hit as well. I think, especially like everybody that had a class where they learned how to build a resume, they didn't learn this in school.
Very
At least
true.
Mine didn't. And I had a couple of business comm classes, and that just wasn't wasn't a focus. I mean, they kind of hit it peripherally, but they didn't beat it into your head how important that was.
This is mostly life lessons that you and I have learned over time.
Yeah.
But that pretty much wraps us up. Before we close everything out, Will, what do you have for us this week for Tricks of the Trade?
Well, I want to address a attitude or a thought process that is not correct. And I can prove it pretty well. I have a lot of conversations with developers that we've been talking about the whole value-based thing on your resume, like how you want to show the value you provide. One thing I've talked to developers about a lot is the idea of how your value comes out. A lot of people seem to really misunderstand how you provide value to an organization or how you provide value to a product. For instance, I have talked to developers who think that a product is worth X amount because it cost, X minus some value to make. And that's kind of a widespread thought process is, okay, it cost me this amount to make it. Therefore, its value is more than that. And I'm going to tell you that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but especially in software. And the reason is okay, let's say it costs you $100,000 to build this piece of software. So you build one copy for somebody, it costs $100,000 for you to build it. So therefore it's worth $100,000 plus something. Copying software is free. So now if I make 2 copies, each one's worth $50,000, right? So therefore, as the number of copies approaches infinity, the value of the software approaches 0.
That is how math works, yes.
Right? Like, think about the premise here. The premise is basically if enough copies of my software go around, it has no value. Now, does the Linux operating system have value?
Depends on which distro.
Yeah. Hey, don't be beating up on Fedora now. No, I'm just kidding.
I have the beard to make that comment.
Yeah, you do. But right, like value is not determined by what you put into something. It's determined by what somebody else gets out of it. In other words, it will rise to the price that the market will take. If you think that the value is what you put into it, it's very easy to either spend too much building something or to undervalue yourself. And one of those two things is more than likely what's going to happen. You're very unlikely to be accurate and be just where you need to be. Whereas the whole price discovery thing works out that the value that your stuff provides to somebody else drives the price. If you do that, you've got a better guide of things because they also know how much that it's going to save them, or they shouldn't be buying it. They know what it's worth to them, if that makes any sense. So just try to shift your thinking that way, and you'll be better off. I don't know of another way to put it. Like the real root of it all is the labor value or the labor theory of value. And I will point out where this came from. It came from a book by a very heavily bearded man named Karl Marx. Now, whatever else you may think of him, one of the things that Karl Marx thought of as evil was profit. Do you want to build a system that makes you your living based on the thoughts of a man who thought profit was evil? I think that's somewhat contraindicated just a little bit. Just be aware of that. Like, think about the value you provide in terms of what someone else can capitalize it for, not on what you put into it. And that will make a lot more sense to you. You'll make more money. That's all I got.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with the news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.